Okay, so in this video we'll go through the first part of the integumentary system. So integumentary system is hair, skin, and nails. You guys probably are aware, but dermatology is the study and treatment of the integument. So functions mainly protection, sensation, thermoregulation, and then kind of less known, the skin actually is an endocrine gland. It helps to create vitamin D, which is important in your skeletal health. So the way that our skin protects is a few different things. So one is natural microflora. So this is good bacteria on our skin. Okay. Mechanical/chemical. This is literally your epithelial cells in your skin are so tightly packed that there's just not room for things to pass through. And then third, immune system. So within your skin, you have cells that are specialized to protect you from pathogenic bacteria or viruses or anything else. So your skin is actually the largest organ in the body. It weighs about 9 pounds on the average person. Obviously that can change dramatically depending on how big you are. It is an external barrier, so it's keeping things from coming into your skin, into your body, but it also importantly is keeping your body inside. If we didn't have skin, all our blood would just leak out, all our fluid would leak out. So we need skin to protect us from the outside and protect our inside from going out. There are two layers. The epidermis is the outer layer. Epi means outside. There are 5 layers to this. We'll go through each. And then the dermis is the bigger layer in the middle here. And then the hypodermis is not a layer of skin. So epidermis is the very outermost part that you're touching. Dermis is the bulk of your skin. And then hypodermis is a layer underneath. So hypo means below. So below the skin. There's 2 main types of skin, thick skin and thin skin. Thick skin you'll find on the palms, hands, soles of the feet. There are no hair follicles and no oil glands. Thin skin is basically found everywhere else. Has hair follicles, has sebaceous glands, these are oil glands. And the thing here is it has no stratum lucidum, which will make sense in a second. So what type of skin do you think you find on the eyelids? Hopefully you said thin. What about on the knees or the elbows? Thick. So epidermis has 5 layers, or what we call strata. So what happens is in the stratum basal here, the deepest layer, there are actively replicating cells here, and as they replicate, they get pushed up towards the outside. So they start in the stratum basal, they're getting nutrients from the dermis below, they replicate, and then they get pushed up here to the stratum spinosum. They hang out here for a while, and then as more cells come in, they just get pushed further and further and further out, and then eventually they get sloughed off from your skin. So the amount of time that it takes to go from the stratum basal here all the way up to the stratum corneum is somewhere between 25 and 50 days, 1 to 2 months. Just something to remember, the epidermis does not have any blood vessels, it's avascular. So the cells up here in the stratum corneum are not living. They don't have any blood supply, so they don't have any nutrients, they can't get other waste, so they are dead cells at that point. The only cells that can actively be replicating that have access to nutrients are the ones on the stratum basal, because the dermis below has lots of blood vessels. So this is another picture looking at the 5 layers. We know that this is thick skin because it has a stratum lucidum. I would highly recommend taking a minute to come up with an acronym for the 5 layers of the epidermis. I think one of the ones that my students used before was, come on, let's get sunburned. The stratum basal is that first deepest layer of the epidermis here. So these are cells that are actively replicating. In this layer, we have 3 different types of cells. So we have keratinocytes that are making keratin, which is important for like waterproofing of the skin, and they provide like structural support. Melanocytes are the cells that are secreting melanin, which is what gives skin its pigmentation. And then Merkel cells are within the stratum basal, and they are like nervous cells. They're receptors. So they sense light, touch. So melanocytes are found in the stratum basal. They are producing melanin, which is just the response to being exposed to UV light from the sun. So when the UV light comes and hits a cell, it hits the DNA directly and can cause damage to the DNA, and that can lead to things like skin cancer eventually. So in order to protect the cell from the UV light, our body secretes something called melanin that makes it harder for the UV light to pass through the skin. So the melanin will absorb the UV rays, and it will protect the nucleus of the cell from having that DNA damage. The skin color that we have is dependent on the activity of the cells. So we may all have the same number of melanocytes, but some individuals will have really active melanocytes. Some people have really non-active melanocytes. The more active they are, the darker the skin color is. And that can be changed, as we all know, with exposure to UV light. The skin will darken to try and protect itself, but mostly that's genetically determined. Next layer is the stratum spinosum. If you look at it in the picture, it looks kind of spiny. This is where there are lots of Langerhans cells, and these are dendritic cells that are important in immune function. These are Langerhans cells. So these are macrophages that are important in immune function. So what they do is they alert the body when there are foreign bacteria or viruses coming in. Throughout the whole skin, you'll find these, but they're mostly going to be found in that stratum spinosum. Individuals that have chronic conditions, especially skin conditions like psoriasis or something like that, will have higher numbers of these Langerhans cells. Next is the stratum granulosum. It's a very thin layer here. This layer is really, really important because it waterproofs the skin. So by doing this, it kind of separates the deeper layers from the more superficial layers. When it waterproofs the skin, it cuts off the nutrients. So anything superficial to this, anything up here, is dead. Anything below it can still be living. The stratum lucidum is this very thin layer that we only see in thick skin. The keratinocytes, the cells in this layer, have this protein called ellatin, which just shows up as clear on the microscope images here. Cells here don't have any nucleus or organelles. They're dead or they're dying. Stratum corneum. This is the most superficial layer. This can be variable in how thick it is. So there might be 10 layers of stratum corneum like on your eyelids, or there might be 40 layers on your arm, just depending on where the skin is. This may or may not be larger or smaller. So here, the cells just kind of slough off, and then that is what your dust is in your house. So it takes somewhere between 25 to 50 days for cells to start from the stratum basal and go all the way up to the corneum, and then get sloughed off. So that was the epidermis. The dermis is a layer just below that. The dermis is this layer here in like darker purple/blue. Dermis has 2 layers. There's the papillary layer, which is this part. Each little bump is called a papilla. And then the reticular layer is most of it that's below. In the papillary layer, we see these little bumps here. This is all areolar tissue. There are lots of blood vessels and lots of white blood cells. These papillae give a little bit of strength to the skin. They're kind of velcroed to each other here, so that allows the skin to stay together. The reticular layer here below is dense irregular connective tissue. If this layer stretches too quickly, it will rip because the cells aren't replicating fast enough, and that's how we get our stretch marks that everyone loves so much. Alright, I will stop this video here, and then we'll pick up with changes in skin on the next one.